giving a careful ramble about study habits that are relevant to language acquisition from what I've seen among my students, where I had students who would do the work. They would do whatever work was assigned, and it looked like good work, and I'd read their writing. It was deserving of top scores. I could understand it. It looked well organized, and I wasn't seeing growth at all, like beyond that. And so, like my conversations in Chinese that I would have with my students in class, they just continued to not understand my most basic questions. When the vocab that they had used on their assignments that looked great came up again in future readings, they didn't show any familiarity with it. There were just little signs where I was just wondering, like, why, shouldn't you be someone who's getting better and better at conversing in Chinese? Shouldn't you be better and better at recognizing the vocabulary that come up in new texts? Since it's obvious that your work looks good, so what's the mismatch? So I started to come up with this theory, this kind of guess, I'll call it a guess, that maybe they're not paying attention to meaning and also sound. With Chinese characters, you can copy Chinese characters, not know how to pronounce them, and not know what they mean. And so that's what I started to push on my students. Is I would tell them, you're going to have to understand what you're writing and understand what you're saying. Following poster presentations as well, I would see that the students would present something that sounded great to me. I was listening for their main ideas and messages and thoughts and points that they were talking about in their posters. And then I would ask them questions about it, and students would say interesting things like, oh, did I already talk about this part? Did I already talk about that part? And I'd say, yeah. And they'd say, oh, okay, then I'm already past the part I thought that I was at. And this again was giving me these clues that, oh, maybe my students are memorizing a string of sounds that my ears pick up as meaningful, but to the student it's not meaningful. They've just memorized the string of sounds, word forms, but not the meanings that go with the words, and sentence forms, but not the meanings that go with the sentences. So two of my solutions were, the first one was to just tell them, you're not going to learn, like, you're not going to grow in the language. And as our texts get harder, as our assignments require more and more vocabulary, that are assuming you've learned a lot of vocabulary, and then this is just building on that. What should be incremental, should be a reasonable amount of new words, is going to look like 200 new words, because all of it's new to you, because you didn't actually learn what we worked with before. So that was one, was just to convince them, just tell them. And the second one was to make graded work and assignments that ensured that. And so now what I do is, after they turn in their reflection essay, well, after they finish their poster presentation, they know that one of the scores will be what I call a listening score, because that's how our grades go in the grade book. And the listening score is going to be based on my questions about their presentation. So as they present, I make little notes about whatever they said, just their main ideas that I heard. And then I ask them questions from my notes, basically about what they just said. And it's not a very meaningful discussion. It's not really meant to be expanding any ideas. I do a little bit if they seem to understand my main comprehension questions, but my questions are just checking that they understand their own presentation. Like, oh, you mentioned you want to travel here. Where did you want to travel to? And it's just known information. It's information that I already know. I'm just checking, do you understand my question about what you just said? Because that's been a problem in the past, is that they don't. So this way, the preparation they do leading up to the poster presentation pushes them to pay attention to the meaning of what they're about to say. That was my hope, and that actually has been what's been happening. Pretty much all of my students are much quicker now. They understand my question, they look up at their poster, they answer my question, and that wasn't happening before. So they're getting used to this process of paying attention to meaning while preparing things. Now the other one is the reflection essay. These are my IB middle year program, 9th and 10th grade. We do other kinds of things in 11th and 12th grade. This is the diploma program. So right now I'm just talking about 9th and 10th grade that I teach. The reflection essay has 3 parts. There's a formative version, it's open note. They get as much help as they want. I push them they have a checklist of things that have to go into it, and it requires they go back through a lot of the texts that we've been reading in this unit and then put it together in a meaningful way that ends up being a reflection on what we've been learning, but digging a lot of language and phrases out of the materials we've already read. And so they do that, and they get to ask me, does this sentence seem okay? I go to edit with them, and so I help them a lot. And they copy it down into their personal notebook that they keep in the classroom. And then I read through, and then I use the rubric for our class to give them a score. But then we have a follow-up formative score that's a couple days later, where they have to read it out loud to me. They have to read the whole reflection essay out loud to me in Mandarin, and then I ask them questions about what they wrote. Again, it's very comprehension type questions, just about the text itself. This also, I saw students sort of groan about it and say, oh no, I wrote this, but I don't know what it means and I don't know how to say it. And so again, I had that same talk with them. Sounds like what you're saying is that you're not actually gaining anything from writing that. If it's just a bunch of, my 9th graders last year said, we're writing a lot, but we don't understand it. And then another student said, yeah, it's just lines. And so by lines, I interpret that to mean Chinese strokes, character strokes. So that was kind of the start of my thinking about this really last year was, if you're just writing characters, you don't know how to say it, and you don't know what it means, then we need to push that. We need to push those 2 other parts to it. So attaching form to meaning, and in terms of Chinese writing, it's attaching written form to sound form to meaning. It's got these 3 parts. And there's more. You got to connect it to context, but that's natural if there's a context. The context of the paragraph, or the context of the situation, or the context of the information that they're talking about. And so that's why it's always in a poster, or in a conversation with me, or in an essay of some kind. So what I'm seeing now is that after 2 years of working with me, really just over a year of me pushing this change that you got to focus on meaning and you got to focus on sound in addition to your characters, I'm seeing the growth that I was looking for in students who were not showing that kind of growth before. So this now I'm feeling a lot more confirmed in my guess before that it was a lack of attention to sound and meaning in addition to written form. So that's an interesting thing I just wanted to share about, and I thank you for listening.